At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. We are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. And we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Now I want you all, those who have hats on, to take off your hats and let the band play our national anthem. And from now on, that national anthem is the national anthem of the Gogo, to be played on all occasions. Freedom! 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 May God bless you.
So after the Declaration of Independence in 1957, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was made the Prime Minister, head of government business, and he was the Prime Minister up until 1960, when the country became a republic and we fully gained independence from the British. And so he was inaugurated as the president, and that is what you find on your screen. Nkrumah together with his wife Fatia Nkrumah, and this is the inauguration service of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah as the president of the Republic of Ghana. And he's heading towards the National Assembly for the ceremony to take place. And don't also forget about the disagreement between the educated elite as well as the chiefs. And by this time, Nkrumah had promulgated the 1954 Constitution, and it had taken off all the seats that belonged to the chiefs in the National Assembly. So that is the state sword you find Nkrumah holding, and that is the same seat today we use in our inauguration service, our ceremony. And he, Nkrumah, is taking the oath of office, and that is what you find in your screen. Very, very beautiful pictures up there. So one of the biggest achievements of the CPP government under Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was the construction of the Akosombo Dam, and it was completed in 1966, the same year that Nkrumah was overthrown. And Nkrumah established this dam, or constructed this dam, to power the industries that he had planned to establish in the country, because he believed that for the country, or for Ghana to be truly independent, there was the need for the country to achieve economic independence. And so he built these factories in order to power the country, to make the economy of the country strong. And so that was the reason behind the establishment or the construction of the Akosombo Dam, basically to power the industries. In the subsequent videos, we shall take and listen to his speech on that day, and it is well to note that he was overthrown just the following month after opening the dam.
And so last Saturday, all was judged ready for a formal inauguration, with young pioneers, acolytes of the new Ghana, and chiefs, cheerfully meaningless relics of the old Ghana, but adding solemnity to the moment of national self-congratulation. And finally, Dr. Nkrumah himself, Acheampong the president, in vice-regal motorcar and sunny mood. This was his dam. He'd borrowed the money, approved the plans, all but built it. Problems were for another day. Budget day, in point of fact, in a fortnight's time, when Ghanaians will learn that they're drastically overspent. But not on the dam, on other, less easily justifiable projects. The dam will pay for itself by the sale of power.
Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world of contradictions. These contradictions, however, keep the world going. Let me explain what I mean. Ghana is a small but very dynamic, independent African state. We are trying to reconstruct our economy and to build a new, free and equal society. To do this, we must attain control of our own economic and political destinies. Only thus can we create higher living standards for our people and free them from the legacies and hazards of a colonial past and from the encroachments of neo-colonialism.
Neo-colonialism, meaning American investment in Africa. His audience knew it was a bad thing. Acheampong had just published a book attacking it. Odd, though, there was American investment in this dam. A further irony, it was that book which made it necessary for Mrs. Nkrumah to open the dam instead of Mrs. Kennedy, as Dr. Nkrumah had hoped. The American government were annoyed by the book and advised Mrs. Kennedy not to go. The fiction that she'd be there was maintained till the last moment, but in the end it was Mrs. Nkrumah who unveiled a plaque marked, "Unveiled by Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy." With Mr. Kaiser engineering and aluminium king, the president then came forward to switch on lights. Mr. Kaiser had spoken, but hadn't explained the other major oddity of the Volta scheme, that the power is to be used to smelt processed bauxite into aluminium, and the processed bauxite is being imported, although Ghana runs over with raw bauxite. But when the lights came on, and the fireworks, these oddities were forgotten in the glow.
Apart from the construction of the hydroelectric power, Nkrumah adopted certain measures to promote state control of the economy. Some of these measures were industrialization. Nkrumah's administration set the agenda for industrialization for the country so as to reduce the country's dependence on agriculture for economic survival. Accordingly, he established a number of light industries at Tema, which was to be the industrial heart of the country. Examples of such industries were Takwa Bonsa Tie Factory, Bolgatanga Rice Factory, Commander Sugar Factory, Akosombo Textiles Limited, Kede Machit Factory, Aboso Glass Factory, Kumasi Shoe Factory, Palugu Tomato Factory, in Sawam Cannery, Brick and Tile Factory, etc. By 1965, the number of wholly state-owned industries had increased from 13 to 22, while as many as 20 more were under construction. These industries were to ensure the production of consumer goods both for the local market and export for the sub-region, and they were to depend on local materials. Another highlight of the economic development that took place during the CPP was in the field of banking and insurance, which had hitherto been dominated by the expatriates. The foreign banks were more generous to the Europeans than they were to Ghanaian traders. Hence, Ghanaian traders found it difficult to obtain loans for businesses. To change this trend, Nkrumah established banking and insurance institutions with large heart for the indigenous industrialists. In 1961, Ghana Commercial Bank was controlling 40% of total deposit and 50% of all credit business. In 1964, it was controlling 52% of total deposit and 84% of credit businesses. In a move to ease congestion at Takoradi Harbour, the Nkrumah government constructed the Tema Harbour. It was started in 1954 and commissioned in 1962. The government again established a shipping line called the Black Star Line in 1958 in pursuit of the CPP's government's policy of self-reliance and independence. The regime of Nkrumah also gave much attention to the transport network of the country so as to provide a catalyst for economic growth. Many feeder roads were built to link agricultural areas to the urban centers. Example of roads constructed under the CPP regime was Takoradi-Accra-Axim Road. The most important of these roads was the Accra-Tema Motorway. Also, the Adome Bridge was built in 1956 to connect the Volta region to the rest of the southern Ghana. To be self-reliant in air travel, the Nkrumah government also established her own national airline, the Ghana Airways Corporation, and brought some airplanes for it.
In 1958, just a year after independence, Ghana Airways was created. At the time, Ghana was not only building institutions on the ground, but also seeking a presence in the skies. With financial backing of about £400,000 and technical partnership from Britain, the airline took its first steps. President Nkrumah, however, had a larger vision. He did not want Ghana's airline to simply exist through foreign partnership. He wanted it to represent the independence and ambition of a new African nation. Over time, the government bought out the British stake, making the airline fully Ghanaian. When its aircraft landed in cities like London, Rome, or New York, it was more than transportation. It was a symbol of Ghana connecting directly with the world. During its peak years, the airline operated an impressive fleet that reflected different eras of aviation technology. Aircraft such as the Ilyushin OL-18, the Vickers C-10, and the powerful McDonnell Douglas DC-10 carried the Black Star across continents. For many travellers arriving at international terminals, the tail fin bearing Ghana's star was a proud symbol of African presence in global aviation.
In February 1962, the government of CPP established the State Construction Corporation to handle all government construction work. The State Construction Corporation was in effect responsible for the execution of all major constructional works of the government during the period. For example, between 1964 and 1965, the SCC was handling 75% of all government construction work. The Nkrumah government established the State Farms Corporation in the country primarily with a view of increasing food production as well as ensuring food security. The corporation cultivated coconut, oil palm, cola, banana, rubber, and many hectares of food crops. On the field of education, the number of primary schools increased from 3,571 in 1957 to 3,713 in 1959, and that of middle school from 1,311 to 1,394. Fee-free elementary education was introduced. That of government and approved secondary schools rose from 38 in 1957, most of them built by the Ghana Educational Trust, which Nkrumah set up in 1958 and that of private schools from 22 to 52. Examples of schools built under the Ghana Educational Trust Policy were Mfanstiman SHS, Oforipenyi SHS, Techiman SHS, Winneba SHS, Swedru SHS, Apam SHS, Doma SHS, Tema SHS, Oda SHS, and Laboni SHS. Many teacher training colleges were built. For example, Nkrumah built Kwadasu College of Education, Atebubu Training College, Brekum Training College, Fosu Training College, and Enche Training College. As a result of importance Nkrumah attached to education, he introduced free education for primary and middle school, that is JHS. He also introduced free senior high school education in the northern region. Again, all university education was free with textbooks and free meals with a stipend for students. In the field of health, the CPP government established the Ghana Medical School in 1964. Again, the CPP government established a number of nursing training schools for nurses and midwives to solve the problem of inadequate staff in the health sector. For example, by 1962, 6 of such nursing schools had been built, and it produced 265 new nurses and midwives. Nkrumah's government introduced certain repressive laws that made his government unpopular. Some of these laws finally led to the overthrow of his regime in 1966. Nkrumah, through parliament, introduced the following act. The first among these laws was the Deportation Act, which was passed in July 1957. This law empowered the Nkrumah government to deport from the country aliens found to be offering support and financial assistance to those opposed to the government. In December 1957, the CPP government introduced the Avoidance of Discrimination Act, which banned all parties, that is political parties, and groupings organized on regional, tribal, and religious bases. After the passage of the act, the opposition party, which were tribal and regional groupings, merged into one party called the United Party (UP) under the leadership of Dr. Kofi Abrifa Bujia. In January 1958, the Emergency Power Act was passed. This law gave powers to the government to deal firmly with any political unrest and disturbances in the country. The last of these measures, which turned out to be the most unpopular of all, was the Preventive Detention Act (PDA). This act empowered the government to arrest and detain without court trial for 5 years anybody suspected to be engaged in activities detrimental to the security of the nation. Towards the end of the year, the Nkrumah government used the PDA to arrest 43 members of the UP. From 1959, many more persons became victims of the PDA, including J.B. Dankwa and Obechebi Lamte, both of whom died in detention. On February 1st, 1964, Nkrumah's government introduced the one-party system. Ghana officially became a constitutionally mandated one-party state on February 1st, 1964. Under this system, the Convention's People's Party, CPP, became the only legitimate political party in Ghana.
Almost all of the African states which broke away from the colonial yoke established one-party states.
Do you think one-party state is good for democracy? If it wasn't democracy, then they should have left us with their colonial masters. They did not force us.
I waited one day when it was a good mood alone. Then I said, why do you want a one-party state? Then he said, I have established so many industries and institutions, and I don't have enough competent people to man them. Many of the people who can do this are in the opposition. And that was why later I found the only way out was to have a one-party state, so we all belong.
So apparently on the 24th of February 1966, Sajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister and first President of the First Republic was overthrown in a military coup led by Major General Acheampong, Emmanuel Kutuka, and J.A. Nkrumah. And these people overthrew Nkrumah for several reasons, some spanning from political to economic to social reasons. And so Major General Acheampong and the military junta formed the National Liberation Council, which was headed by J.A. Nkrumah. These were the members of the National Liberation Council: J.A. Nkrumah, Chairman; J.W.K. Harley; E.K. Kotoka; B.A. Yakubu; A.K. Okran; A.A. Afrifa; A.K. Deku. In our subsequent videos, we shall take a look at why the military decided to overthrow Sergeant Dr. Kwame Nkrumah from a press conference they organized by the National Liberation Council led by J.A. Nkrumah. Now, it is important to note that after the overthrow of Nkrumah, everything about him was destroyed, even including cars that bear his name were all cancelled. Statues of Nkrumah were all pulled down, as you can see in the video. I believe that it was the plan of the military junta to actually erase Nkrumah from the history books of Ghana, and so even his ideological center at Winneba, all the books there were burnt down. Nkrumah's properties were all destroyed, as you can find in your screen. This huge giant statue of Nkrumah was also pulled down. Let's take a look at the reaction of Ghanaians after Nkrumah was overthrown. During Nkrumah's overthrow, there were some political prisoners who were detained under the Preventive Detention Act, PDA. And so after Nkrumah was overthrown, all these political prisoners were actually released, and that is what you find on your screen. These people were kept in prison because they were deemed to have been behind bombing attacks on the president whilst he was still in power. A lot of these people were detained without trial under the PDA by Nkrumah. So let's take and listen to some of the prisoners that were liberated after the overthrow of Asadi for the Convention.
The period I was there, I think about between 10 to 15 people died at the time I was there.
How were you treated here?
Before I was sent to prison there, I was in chains and handcuffs for 16 good months.
Were you in chains and handcuffs all the time?
Yeah, for 16 good months in the place here.
How did you feel when you learned you were going to be let out?
Oh, I'm very happy, sir.
How long were you in detention?
I've been in detention for nearly 5 years now.
How did they treat you?
Well, I was not so badly treated, but the lockups were too much for us. We were kept in custody for about 3 months without giving any air.
What about the food and general treatment?
The food is generally poor, very, very poor, and had caused a lot of illness to us, to many of us.
What did you feel when you heard you were being allowed out?
I felt that probably the army might have taken power. Otherwise, the wicked government would not permit anybody to be released, because we were told that we would remain in detention for the rest of our lives.
So right after the coup plotters that overthrew Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the National Liberation Council met the press, and they actually told them their reason behind the overthrow of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Now, the man you find on your screen is J. Ankara. He will be introducing them very shortly, but they will introduce a certain guy who, after the overthrow of Nkrumah, was deemed to be associated with the coup. I think he was parading himself that he was behind the coup, and so the military officers decided to bring him to come and testify if indeed he was the brain behind the coup, because there was so much rumors in the public that Nkrumah's coup was instigated from outside. But to J. Ankara, who led the leaders, he said the coup was instigated by Ghanaians themselves. Let's take and listen to him.
On my right is Major General E.K. Kotoka, who is the second member or the first member of the National Liberation Council. We have called you here this morning for one specific reason, and that is you've heard the name of one Amuhia who has associated himself with this coup and had published himself in the British papers and most of the papers that is the brain behind us. And we want to prove that we were not instigated by anybody, neither we want to refute any allegation that ACA or God knows what instigated us to carry out this coup. This coup was carried out completely because of the things that had happened in Ghana and because of the tyranny and the despotism of Kwame Nkrumah, the deposed president. Everybody in Ghana was fed up with it. And therefore you could see the spontaneous result which followed the coup. You would have seen when you were coming probably thinking that Ghana would have been put under curfew or all other things, but nothing was done. There was no brain behind it. It was work from us and from within, without the aid of anybody, any foreign country or any country. It has been some of these things in Ghana that when a ruler is useless, you depose him. And therefore we have deposed Kwame Nkrumah. We don't want tyranny or anything here. And therefore I would like to not waste time to bring in Amu here for you to see him. And you can see that he doesn't even know. I don't know him. I haven't seen him before, neither is any of us. The only thing that we know of him since he started claiming himself was that the COP found in his records that he's a criminal who is wanted in Ghana. And we were so quiet because we wanted him. He's a criminal wanted in Ghana, so that we put him in the cold ice chest. Well, this is Mr. Amuhia. He calls himself Amuhia or Amushia or ever. His name is never spelled correct either. And we would like him to tell you how he organized this coup and how he was the brain behind it. And who he knew on this.
First and foremost, on the 24th morning, 8 o'clock news announced in London that Ghana has announced that jointly the army and the police have overthrown the regime of the tyrant, Kwame Nkrumah.
Did you come to brainwash me, Kotoka, the police, or somebody, and tell us how to conduct this? Or did you try to tell us where we should, how we should organize our army or the operations to be carried out?
No, sir. This is exactly what I am coming to, sir. If I should be given the opportunity, I shall explain thoroughly as I am before you and before the world press.
In Nkrumah's book, Dark Days in Ghana, he recounts his reaction and how the 1966 coup took place in Ghana. He writes, "One of the first things I did after my arrival in Guinea was to establish an efficient communications system so that I could be kept fully informed of what was happening inside Ghana. Almost at once, I began to receive detailed eyewitness account of what actually took place on 24th February and in the dark days which followed the army and the police usurpation of power. At the same time, there had been a steady flow of Ghanaians to visit me in Conakry to tell me about what had happened in Ghana and to express their loyalty. The true account of the seizure of power in Ghana by traitors and neo-colonialists does not make a pleasant reading. But the fact must be faced and put on record so that the enormity of the crime committed against the people of Ghana can be accurately assessed. I left Accra on 21st February 1966. I was seen off at the airport by most of the leading government and party officials and by service chiefs. I recall the handshakes and expressions of good wishes from Harley, Deku, Yakubu, and others. These men, smiling and ingratiating, had all the time treason and treachery in their minds. They had even planned my assassination on that day, though they later abandoned the idea. I remember the handshake with Major General Bauer to be murdered in cold blood 3 days later when he refused to surrender to the rebel army soldiers. After a week of so-called maneuvers, the operation began early in the morning of Wednesday, 23rd February 1966, when the garrison at Kumasi, numbering 600 men, was ordered to move southwards to Accra. On the way, a convoy of some 35 vehicles was met and halted by 2 arch-traitors, Colonel Emmanuel Kwesi Kotoka, commander of the 2nd Infantry Brigade Group, and Major Akwesi Amankwa Afrifa of the 2nd Brigade. Kotoka, who had recently been put in charge of Kumasi garrison and had yet confirmed his appointment. Afrifa was left in command while Kotoka went to Accra to report progress to Commissioner of Police John Willie Kofi Harley, and to find some soldier better known than himself to be the nominal head of the revolt. The man chosen was Major General Nkrumah. In the Congo, he had shown some bravery, and at least I had decorated him for his services, but essentially he was a mediocre caliber. In 1965, I retired him. Undoubtedly, it was his lack of understanding of what was going on around him which recommended him as a figurehead to those manipulating the coup. The troops were told then that I intended sending them to fight in Vietnam and in Rhodesia, and that I had deserted Ghana, taking with me £8 million. There was, they were told, no government left in Ghana, and it was their duty to assume control of the country to maintain law and order. Already, it was said Russian planes were landing on secret airstrips in northern Ghana. Furthermore, a secret tunnel had been made from Flagstaff House, the presidential residence, to Accra Airport, and for days, Russians had been arriving. The only way to save Ghana and to avoid being sent to Vietnam, the troops were told, was to take Flagstaff House. In the Makola market, a woman who had a large picture of myself above her stall was shot dead by an army officer after refusing 3 times to hand over for destruction. This kind of incident, not seen by foreign journalists, who obediently and very willingly photographed and reported only the staged demonstrations and rigged press interviews, was a typical of many other pathetic but deeply moving acts of heroism performed by the ordinary men and women of Ghana during those dark days.
Fellow countrymen, my heart is heavy as I witness the damage which this clique of neo-colonialist conspirators are doing to our country. At the bidding of their overseas neo-colonialist masters, they are dismantling the work of 50 years. They are telling you that Ghana is bankrupt. They are telling you that our country is in debt to the extent of some 240 million pounds. What fools they are. How ignorant for them to think that you believe these stupid lies. Open your eyes and look around you. See for yourself. See the splendid new Tama Harbor. See the mighty water dam. See the fine roads which we have built under the leadership of the Convention People's Party and its government. See the schools, the colleges, and the universities. See the clinics, hospitals, health centers, and the facilities which we have created. See the factories which are already springing up. These are no debts. These are not debts. They are investments in our future as an independent nation. These are the physical guarantees of the bright new future which I have promised you and I have been working for. Together, we can put our Ghana firmly and squarely on its own feet. Together, we can create the things we need for ourselves instead of going cap in hand for charity handouts from foreign powers whose only wish is to exploit us and make us vassals to their interests. I know these are hard and trying days for you. I have never tried to conceal from you that real independence, that is to say economic independence, does not come without hard struggle and sacrifice. Unlike the cheats and deceivers, the liars and traitors who are now trying to lord it over you, I have never promised you any easy road. I have respected your good sense, your capacity for work, your pride in yourselves, and your sense of national dignity. Why do you think these traitors, these agents and lackeys of colonialism and of international intrigue to destroy the independence of Ghana, chose this moment to perform their dastardly act? I will tell you. Less than 1 month before they struck to destroy all our hard work, we had inaugurated the first electricity from the water dam. Only 3 days before this treachery, we had signed a new agreement to irrigate the mighty Accra Plains. At last, we were on the threshold of a great new victory. We had in 1957 won our political independence after years of struggle. Now in 1966, we were at the threshold of winning our economic independence. The same people who tried to sabotage our winning of political independence 9 years ago have now struck to sabotage our economic independence. and are systematically dismantling our socialist gains and achievements. Before the traitors and the rebellious National Liberation Council tried to usurp power during my absence from Ghana, Ghana was a haven to which the oppressed from all parts of Africa could come to carry on their struggle. It was a haven for freedom fighters, for independence and against colonialism. The name of Ghana was revered all over the African continent as a staunch friend of the oppressed. African brothers from South Africa, from Rhodesia, from Mozambique and Angola, from the so-called Portuguese Guinea and the Cape Verde Islands and other oppressed colonial areas were given hospitality amongst us. Do you think that this is something of which we needed to be ashamed? Not at all. On the contrary, it was something of which we should be justly proud. Haven't we proclaimed that the independence of Ghana is meaningless until it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa? Now, hundreds of these brave freedom fighters who came to our country trusting us to look after them and help them in their struggle against colonial oppression, and believing as we do that Africa and the struggle for freedom is indivisible. These brave men and women have been sent back, bag and baggage, by this traitorous clique to the countries from which they had fled to seek refuge, inspiration, and protection in Ghana. Countrymen, a new phase of the African Revolution has been reached. This revolution must overcome and triumph over imperialism, racialism, and neocolonialism. It must finally usher in the total emancipation and the political unification of our continent. Africa must be free. Africa must be united.
So after the coup, Emmanuel Kutuka, who was a brain behind the overthrow of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and Dr. K. Ebuja were interviewed overseas and about the way forward for the country and how things were progressing after the overthrow of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in 1966. And so let's take a look at the interview granted by these two people. And bear in mind, Dr. K. Ebuja will later become the Prime Minister of Ghana with Edward Kufuor as the President in the Second Republic of Ghana.
How is the reconstruction of the country going since the overthrow of the Nkrumah regime?
I think very well indeed. It's going very well. Everybody is working hard, and we hope it won't be long when things will be on good footing.
Returning to ex-President Nkrumah, do you think he'll ever try to return to Ghana?
We'll be very pleased indeed to have him back in Ghana. We'll give him the red carpet.
Thank you, sir.
It's very difficult to say. If they work fast, we are prepared to hand over as soon as things are ready, when the constitution is drawn, and when probably they've finished. You know, there are a lot of commissions going on at present, in which quite a lot of people, parliamentarians, some civil servants, and public officers have been affected. And when these the commissions are going on now, this will lead to trials. When we finish cleaning this mess, as we call it, the Constitution is written, referred to Constituent Assembly, and then throw it to the country in the form of a referendum. Then we'll hand over. And I don't know, I can't say. It depends on how fast they work. No, we are sincere. We are serious. We are serious. No, I don't think you can imagine how one man can hold 3 ministries, portfolios for 3 ministries. It's really a burden on us. We are not happy about it ourselves. So you should take us seriously.
General Kotka, are you, as a member of the National Liberation Council of Ghana, concerning yourself at all with the problem of the Ghanaian students in London and other countries who've had their bursaries and scholarships withdrawn?
No, that is a matter for the High Commissioner here, and he will see to any petitions forwarded by the students.
Your government statement on the withdrawal of these scholarships has said that those students who are qualified for further training in Ghanaian institutions will get it. Others will have the opportunity to serve in the reconstruction of their country. What role do you see for them in the reconstruction of Ghana?
Those who are qualified will be employed in positions where they can help reconstruct Ghana. Those who are not qualified and are ready to pursue their studies further will have to go into institutions where they can pursue their studies.
And those who are neither qualified nor capable of pursuing further studies?
They will have to serve Ghana in any capacity in which they are qualified.
Such as teaching, farming?
Well, if they are qualified for teaching, they may take teaching. If they are qualified for farming, they may farm. If they can't do any of these,
specifically Ghanaian problems there.
The one prominent in my mind is about the refugees who are at present from Nkrumah in Ghana now, in Guinea now. I might raise that with United Nations officials to see whether they can help us repatriate these Ghanaians who are willing to come back but are denied the opportunities of coming back.
And those who are not willing to come back, who are in fact working with Nkrumah in Guinea, would you raise the subject of them too?
There might be just a very few indeed, very, very few, like Yankee and some few diehards. But the greater majority, I am sure, would like to come back to Ghana.
Turning to relations with Britain, finally, sir, General Kotka, as a member of the National Liberation Council of Ghana, are you concerned with the problem of the students who've recently had their bursaries and scholarships withdrawn? The government statement on these students said that those who were qualified would be invited to return to Ghana and...
In April 1967, a year into Nkrumah's overthrow, there were counter-coups against the National Liberation Council, led by J.A. Nkrumah. There were some group of soldiers who also decided to overthrow the National Liberation Council, and in their operation it was called the Operation Jetai Boys. However, their coup was not successful because the NLC, the National Liberation Council, was successful in dealing with the coup. However, at the end of the coup, Emmanuel Kutuka, who was instrumental during the coup against Nkrumah, was killed in that coup. And so the coup plotters were lined up and they were given a tribunal trial, as you have seen on your screen. And so J.A. Nkrumah, the leader of the National Liberation Council, will brief the press about the developments that has taken place and the measures taken by the National Liberation Council in ensuring that the country was safe and that the government was also safe. Let's take and listen to J.A. Nkrumah's press conference concerning the issue. Let's also take a key note as to what will happen to these coup plotters who are also plotted same to overthrow the National Liberation Council. Their fate as it stands.
We would like this morning to tell you the steps we have taken since last Monday. A, steps have been taken to enforce the security of the vulnerable points of the government. Service inquiry have begun to investigate the circumstances leading to the murder of Lieutenant General Kotoka, Captain Aveva, Captain Buckle, and Sergeant Osei Grunchi. And also to establish as far as possible the origin and motive of this insurrection. We hope that these investigations now in progress will cover all possible aspects of the security of the state. Meanwhile, proceedings have begun to try by military tribunal those who have been identified as being directly responsible for the murder of Lieutenant General Kotoka. This trial will begin next week. I'd like to here now mention that as far as we've got, the master plan which we have discovered indicates clearly an intention of young junior officers who had planned to assassinate all senior officers to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel.
Samson Sasu Bafowa, the tribunal sentenced you to death by shooting. Osei Poku, the tribunal sentenced you to death by shooting. Lieutenant Augustus Owusujima, the tribunal sentenced you to death by shooting. Kufuor, the tribunal sentenced you to 25 years imprisonment.
GH551, Lieutenant Samuel Benjamin Arthur. The tribunal sentenced you to death by firing squad. March him out. GH601, Lieutenant Moses Yaboa. The tribunal sentenced you to death by firing squad. March him out. GH976, Second Lieutenant Osei Poku. The tribunal sentenced you to 30 years imprisonment of hard labor.
As indicated earlier, the NLC were caretakers, and therefore they put in place measures to return the country into civilian rule within the shortest possible time. And so to this end, on November 15, 1966, the NLC appointed a 16-member constitutional commission under the chairmanship of Chief Justice Kufuor, the then Chief Justice, to draft a constitution for the country. The political party's decree of April 1969 announced the lifting of the ban on the formation of political parties from May 1st, 1969. August 29, 1969 was fixed as the date for the general election, and September 30th, 1969 as the date by which powers would be handed to an elected government. With the lifting of the ban on the formation of political parties, many political parties were formed in the country. In the end, 5 political parties survived the campaign and contested the election. These were the Progress Party (PP), led by K.A. Buzia, the National Alliance of Liberals (NAL), also led by K.A. Gbedema, the All People's Republican Party APRP, led by PKK Kwedu, the People's Action Party PAP, led by Imoru Ayana, and finally the United Nationalist Party UNP, led by Dr. H.S. Bannerman. There were 140 seats to be contested. The election took place as scheduled on 29th August 1969, and the results came as a surprise to everybody. The Progress Party of Dr. K.A. Buzia gained a landslide victory by winning 105 of the seats. The National Alliance of Liberals, led by Gbedema, also won 29 of the seats. On 3rd September, Dr. Buzia, the leader of the Progress Party, was sworn in as the Prime Minister of the Second Republic of Ghana. And that is what you find on your screen. It is important to note that in the 1969 election, the National Liberation Council banned the CPP from contesting in the election. And so the CPP was not represented in the 1969 election. And so members of the CPP broke away from the CPP and formed their own government, especially K.A. Gbedema, who formed the National Alliance of Liberals. Now, the Second Republic was inaugurated at the Independence Square on October 1st, 1969 with Dr. Kofi Buzia as the Prime Minister. The video in your shot is a retired Chief Justice Edward Kufuor, who was one of the Big Six, was elected as the President and ceremonial head of state. This was as a result of the 1969 Constitution, which provided for a ceremonial President as head of state and a Prime Minister who was the chief executive officer. And so that is what you find in your screen, the inauguration of the Second Republic, and Edward Kufuor being sworn in as the President of the Republic of Ghana. So after these ceremonies, a state banquet was organized to inaugurate the Second Republic, to celebrate the achievement of the country after the overthrow of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in 1966, and that is 2 to 3 years ago. And so you find guests from even other countries at a dinner party to actually celebrate the success of the country at this point. So the next thing to do after the inauguration service was the swearing in of civilian government ministers in Ghana, led by Buzia. Take note of the presence of the army, the NLC, Afrifa, Amankwa Afrifa, in the you could see that the army, the National Liberation Council, was part of the process all throughout, even though this election was supposed to be a civilian election, a democratic one. But you can find the presence of the army all around them. You can see Major General AFRC giving out the certificate to these newly appointed ministers in the Republic. Did you see Kufuor? Yeah, Kufuor came in there. If you saw Kufuor over there. In April 1970, a statue of Lieutenant General Emmanuel Kutuka was unveiled at the Kutuka International Airport. The airport was named after him. Now, let me remind you, in case you have forgotten, Kutuka was killed during the abortive coup led by the Operation Jetai boys. And in that coup, even though the coup was abolished, was not successful, Emmanuel Kutuka died in that coup, and so a statue was unveiled in 1970 by the civilian government, the Progress Party, to actually celebrate this gallant soldier who was instrumental in the overthrow of the first Republic of Ghana. And the question I ask is that is it that the PP or the Progress Party actually supported the coup against Nkrumah, killing or overthrowing a civilian elected president, and they had to celebrate this man who overthrew a legitimate government, which was voted by the people. And that's that statue of Emmanuel Kutuka. These were some of the economic policies of the Busia administration. Busia made rural development a priority. To ensure the success of this policy, a separate ministry, that's Ministry of Social and Rural Development, the first of its kind in Ghana, was established. The ministry was set up to fast-track development projects in the rural communities in order to solve three primary problems identified. The first problem was the need to ensure food security by being self-sufficient in food production. The second problem was to stop people from migrating from the rural to urban areas in search for non-existing white-collar jobs. The Busia government also created the National Service Corps to serve as a unit where young men and women from the country's universities and other institutions of higher learning would place their services at the disposal of the country for community help and other projects. The Busia government also introduced the Aliens Compliance Order of November 18, 1970. As a result of foreign control of the economy, the Busia government passed the Aliens Compliance Order of November 18, 1970, which gave the illegal immigrants up to December 2, 1970 to obtain the necessary documents or leave Ghana. In the same year, the government passed the Ghanaian Business Promotion Act. This was intended to promote Ghanaian businesses by eliminating dubious alien businessmen and various categories of aliens connected with smuggling and other economic crimes against interest of the state. The Article 9 of the Transitional Provisions of the 1969 Constitution provided for the dismissal of public servants for corruption, ineptitude, and inefficiency. Based on these provisions, Busia dismissed 568 public servants. One of the dismissed public servants, E.K. Salah, challenged his dismissal and pursued his right in court. Court ruled in favor of Salah, but Busia rejected the court's verdict. The Busia government invited the IMF to Ghana for an expert analysis of our economic situations and to offer the best form of remedy to arrest the dwindling economic fortunes of the country. After critical analysis, the IMF advised that the cedi be devalued by 44% against the dollar in 1971 in order to remedy the fundamental disequilibrium in the balance of payment. In 1972, 3 years after the inauguration of the Second Republic, Colonel Ignatius Kutu Acheampong overthrew the Progress Party led by K.A. Busia and established the National Redemption Council. Let's take a listen to why he overthrew the Progress Party, PP.
The government is a military government which will rule with advice from certain eminent civilians in the country. I would like to emphasize immediately that this coup was not initiated by the armed forces merely to satisfy our selfish ends. As I said in my earlier broadcasts, the takeover was occasioned principally by the hypocrisy of the Bouzia regime, coupled with the inefficient management by that regime of our economy. The malpractices which existed before the 1966 coup are still with us, and there was no prospect of seeing an end of them. Matters got steadily worse, especially in the economic field, and it became obvious that the Bouzia government had no clue as to how to arrest the position. Yes. In simple terms, we are almost like a nation at war without an external enemy. The National Redemption Council has therefore decided to place the economy of Ghana on a war footing. We are soldiers. We know one way of dealing with crisis situations, and that is action. I want to ensure the nation that we shall spare no effort, and no sacrifice will be too great for us in this gigantic task of winning a great economic war.
This was an interview granted by K.A. Bouzia after his overthrow in 1972 by Colonel Ignatius Kutu Acheampong. At the time of the coup, K.A. Bouzia was not in the country. He was in London for medical checkup, and he got the news, as it was in the case of Osadefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Bouzia got the news that he had been overthrown, and so the press in London decided to interact with him and ask him about his way forward after the coup. It is also important to note that at this time or period, Osadefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was still in exile. He had not returned to Ghana after he was overthrown in 1966. And so in 1972, when he heard that Bouzia had been overthrown, he actually wrote a letter to Bouzia. You can check out in my other videos. I have the letter, a copy of the letter. You can read it for yourself, and it is so interesting. After some few months after the overthrow of Bouzia, Kwame Nkrumah died.
I am the elected head of the government of Ghana. There has not been an election. There has only been an adventure by a small band of the military people stationed in Accra.
Your information at the moment then is that this coup has not been successful?
My information is that the coup hasn't got nationwide support.
Do you know the Lieutenant Colonel who has led this coup?
Only by name.
The coup leaders have accused you of malpractices and arbitrary arrests. What do you say to that?
There has not been a single person detained in the 2 years that I have been in office. And these preposterous charges, I think anybody in Ghana who knows me knows the truth and knows this is senseless nonsense.
What are you going to do now? Are you going to fly back to Accra?
I am not saying what I'm going to do, except that I will not let my people down, and they will soon know my next move.
Do you feel there's any chance at all that this military coup will in the end be successful or not?
I have no doubt that it will fail.
Do you feel very depressed tonight?
I am sad. I am sad because I can think of the tragedy this would be for Africa, and particularly for Ghana. And that, of course, makes me sad. But I'm not depressed in the sense that I have no faith or confidence in eventual victory. We shall win through.
Surgical Dr. Kwame Nkrumah died on the 27th of April 1972 in Romania, and Nkrumah had been in exile since 1969, and so because of that, the Guinea government where Nkrumah lived was not in good relation with the Ghanaian government, and therefore Nkrumah's funeral was held in Guinea, and that is what you find on your screen. When he was in exile in Guinea, he became a co-president with Sékou Touré, and so Nkrumah was still a president in Guinea, and so the people of Guinea gave Nkrumah a state burial. So Nkrumah's first funeral was not held in Ghana, but it was done outside the country in Guinea.
In fine, we have gathered here to set forth his brilliant light, to dispel darkness in the lives of all who are oppressed, suppressed, and distressed by racial discrimination, segregation, and colonialism, and to mourn the loss of a fallen hero who was an indefatigable and gallant, indomitable fighter for the great cause of Africa. Honneur! Gloire! Victoire! Vive la Révolution!
After the successful overthrow of the Busia government on 13 January 1972, the National Redemption Council (NRC) was formed with Lieutenant Colonel Acheampong as the head of state and chairman. Some members of the council were J.H. Kobina, who was the IGP, P.F. Quay, who was Navy Commander, Major A.H. Salome, E.N. Mori as Attorney General, and many others. If you want to find out some of the reasons why K.A. Busia was overthrown, you can check in the link in the description. I have a separate video on that. In July 1972, few months after the overthrow of K.A. Busia, Colonel Ignatius Kutu Acheampong negotiated with the Guinean government to have Nkrumah's body repatriated and reburied in his hometown in Kufuor in the western region of Ghana. Let's take and watch some of the footage on the day of Nkrumah's reburial at his hometown in Kufuor in the western region. Colonel Acheampong also suffered some coups against his government. The most important of these coups were in 1972 and 1976. In 1972, some group of young soldiers tried to topple Acheampong's government. However, it was not successful. The 1976 coup, however, involved Major Kojo Chikata, who would later become a prominent figure in the PNDC government, led by Rawlings. Acheampong came to inherit a lot of debt. Ghana owned a lot of debt during that period, and so he decided to champion a popular policy known as Yentua, which he felt that Ghana was not going to honor her loan obligations to the international community, and Ghana, in simple terms, was not going to pay all the loans that she owned. And so this, came with it a backlash from the international communities and donors, and a lot of these countries decided not to help Ghana or even give any items of that sort to Ghana, because Ghana was heavily dependent on importation, and more so there was no money to import into the country. And so Acheampong championed the self-reliance policy, Operation Feed Yourself, Operation Feed Your Industry. All the materials you find there were made and produced here in Ghana, and for 2 years the country never imported anything from the outside world. And this was a testimony that yes, indeed, the country could have done better. And so these are some of the shots of Acheampong's activities in Ghana during his tenure as the chairman of the National Redemption Council. So over here, Acheampong helped some group of farmers to construct irrigation, to help irrigate their farms. And so you find them digging tunnels and other things. And this was one of the features of the military. Most of them got themselves involved in the work that they were doing. And so all the military leaders that we will come across, you find them being part of the work, working with the people, unlike the civilians. So at this period, this irrigation was constructed by Ghanaians and Ghanaians themselves, with no foreign aid. Acheampong did quite a lot of things. He also opened, some factories to help in the production of certain items in the country, and that is what you also find on your screen. Acheampong indeed did a lot for Ghana. He did a lot, but it's just unfortunate that Acheampong's role in the history of Ghana, because he came as a military leader, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. And more so, he came to overthrow the PP, that's the Progress Party, which today are the remnant, of the NPP, and so of course no NPP may want to talk about Acheampong. And don't also forget that NDC was also the party that came to, the AFRC, because that came to overthrow Acheampong's and the Kufuor's government, are today also known as the NDC. And so these two, major political parties playing a major role in Ghana today are actually have issues with the NRC and the SMC 1 and 2, and therefore none of these political parties wants to eulogize or talk about the achievement of Acheampong, and that partly has accounted for the reason why Acheampong's achievements are less visible in our history books. But Acheampong indeed did a lot of things for Ghana. In this video, Acheampong assesses the progress that Ghana was making and also outline a 5-year developmental plan from 1975 to 1980. And he is going to spell out the details of this 5-year developmental plan.
During this period, in spite of the difficulties brought about by grave international economic circumstances over which we have no control, we have been able to achieve, through the enthusiastic response of all Ghanaians, a reasonable measure of social and economic stability. We as a people are now more confident in tackling our national problems. We have also created the right climate in which positive development can take place. Accordingly, we are proposing guidelines to serve as a framework for our further economic development and growth during the ensuing 5 years. In launching these guidelines, we are calling Ghanaians to even greater sacrifices and achievements. It is the fervent hope of the government that Ghanaians will rally round now, as they have in the past, and that together we shall move forward as a team to achieve a better and fuller life for all. And I'll show you a copy of the guidelines for the 5-year development plan.
Now, due to the work, the immense work that Acheampong did for the country, he was loved by many, and some of the traditional chiefs held a deba to honor Acheampong. And this is the Asante people, as you can see there. I think that was Pokuwari and Yana and other chiefs who held a deba to honor Acheampong and what he has done for the country. And that is the deba you find on your screens. So from 1975 onwards, the country began to experience economic hardship. Basic commodities such as milk, sugar, soap were all scarce in the country, and this was mainly because of a trade malpractice which was called kalabule at that time, that we all know. Some of the traders were hoarding these goods, and so the video you find on your screen were soldiers who had gone to seize these items from the traders, and they were distributing them to the public, I think at a control price. And so that is what you find on your screen. And kalabule became very, very, very serious. There was intense pressure on Acheampong to actually allow election to take place, but Acheampong was adamant. So he decided to change the face of the National Redemption Council. He felt that probably the people around him. So he decided to reconstitute the NRC. And so the video you find on your screen was the reconstitution of the National Redemption Council to be called the SMC 1, the Supreme Military Council 1. So that is Acheampong ushering in the new appointees for the Supreme Military Council 1 in 1976. So Acheampong changed the National Redemption Council to the SMC 1 with the aim of trying to pacify the people so that there will be a new change. Acheampong also proposed certain reforms like the Unigov, whereby he felt that the military and the civilians can work together. Acheampong actually was not, he didn't want election to take place, if I may say in that way. He of course wanted to be president for quite a long time, or chairman of the country for a long time. On the Thursday, July 6, 1978, the country woke up to the news of the resignation of Major General Kufuor Acheampong as the head of state and chairman of the Supreme Military Council, SMC-1. In a letter to the Supreme Military Council, General Acheampong said he had taken the decision in the interest of the nation. Lieutenant General F.W.K. Kufuor, Chief of Defense Staff, has assumed the chairmanship of the council, and following the resignation of General Acheampong, the following promotions have been made. Major General R.E.A. Kote, Army Commander, now becomes Chief of Defense Staff. Brigadier N.A. Odate Wellington has now been promoted to the rank of Major General and becomes the Army Commander. And so from here, in 1978, General Kufuor takes over the SMC-1. Now, General Kufuor reconstitutes the SMC-1 with new members, like the chairman, Mr. Ernest Akon, will be the IGP. Kufuor will be the chairman. Major General Ari Kote will be the Chief of Defense Staff. Rear Admiral J.K. Amedome will be the Navy Commander. And then some of the members, Major General E.K. Utuka and others. So, from 1978, Kufuor takes over the country and reconstitutes the SMC-1 as SMC-2. Even though on July 31st, 1978, the SMC-2, led by Kufuor, proposed to return Ghana to civilian rule with a transitional interim national government. However, there was intense pressure on the SMC-2 to change this idea. On November 30th, 1978. The University Teachers Association of Ghana, UTAG, for instance, called on the government to produce a permanent constitution reflecting the mood of the nation for freedom of association and expression. The National Union of Ghana Students, NUGS, also added its voice to this call and reiterated the need for a general election by universal adult suffrage to return the country to civilian rule by July 1st, 1979. In late October, announcements were made that local council elections would be held for the first time in 20 years, and on December 13, 1978, the political parties decree was passed. It banned all old political parties like the CPP, the UP, the NAL, and the NPP. On May 15, 1979, junior officers of the Air Force, led by Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, attempted a coup d'etat against the SMC-2. Rawlings and his men were however arrested and put on trial at the Burma Hall for their role in the attempted coup. Though the coup failed, the plotters, as expressed by Mr. Akins, who was the Director of Public Prosecutions, were worried not only about the injustice in the Ghanaian society, but also the tarnished image of the Ghana Army due to malfeasance on the part of the members of the government. On the morning of June 4, 1979, when the court-martial trying Rawlings and his accomplices was to resume sitting, another group of junior officers and regular soldiers led by Major Boachi Jan released Rawlings and his men from prison. The troops gained control of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, but not without fierce resistance from the troops loyal to the SMC-2 under the command of Major General Odate Wellington. Skirmishes took place throughout the day, leading to Odate Wellington's death at the Nima police station, where he had taken refuge after running short of ammunition. It led to the arrest of many SMC2 affiliates, including General Kufuor, and eventually to his overthrow. To avoid further bloodshed, Major General Joshua Hamidou came on air at about 8:30 p.m. to confirm the success of the coup d'etat. He urged all those still fighting in support of the SMC2 to stop firing and return to barracks.
Here to tell you just one or two things. If any further bloodshed has to be avoided in this country, everybody might have as well realize that the ranks have borne the brunt of the suffering of this country for too long. They want bloodshed. They want bloodshed. So for heaven's sake, do not beg in their way.
Countrymen, it is nearly 1 month now since, by the spontaneous action of the junior officers and men of the Ghana Armed Forces, the government of the Supreme Military Council was overthrown and the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council was established. That action represented a revolt of the ordinary Ghanaian against social injustice, against economic hardship, and against the cancer of corruption that had eaten deep into the fabric of our society. I've come to the studio today to brief you on the latest state of the revolution and to share with you our thoughts on the future of our dear nation. I do this in the conviction that there can be no revolution unless the people, all of us, really understand what it is all about, and springing from that understanding, genuinely commit our support to it. Let me remind you again of the stated aim of the revolution. The action taken by the junior officers and other ranks of the Ghana Armed Forces was motivated by a desire to bring justice, social, economic, and political, to all citizens of Ghana. After 7 years in office, the army was going back to barracks without any steps having been taken to punish those who had tarnished the name of the armed forces. This situation posed a threat to the continued existence of the armed forces and the stability of the country, hence the spontaneous action of June 4th to preempt a coup immediately after handover to a civilian administration. We have all heard from every political party say how corrupt the country has become. But from past experience, we know that none of them would do a thorough job of eradicating corruption once they came into office. Since the future belongs to the young, it was felt that we must safeguard the supreme national interest and bring social justice into the body politic. The main purpose of the exercise is to ensure that the gap between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and poor, is bridged. This is a limited objective which would help the incoming administration to take all necessary long-term measures for bringing stability to the nation. I know that there are many Ghanaians and many friends of Ghana abroad who have been distressed by some recent developments. We have also been made aware of the depth of feeling, both at home and abroad, about the turn of events in Ghana. Ghana has had a long tradition of tolerance and respect for the rule of law and internationally accepted principles of justice. The fear, both within and outside Ghana, is that we may now be abandoning this tradition in favor of some arbitrary conception of instant justice. This fear, though understandable, is not well founded, as a better appreciation of the circumstances will reveal. Let me tell you in simple language. The people of Ghana have endured hunger for far too long. There is not one single worker who could make ends meet, and the miracle is that the people have been able to endure this for so long. You may say that this has been possible because of our excellent tradition of tolerance and patience. But patience and tolerance can be dangerous because they allow a buildup of anger to such an extent that when the bubble finally bursts, there can hardly be a way of containment.
The demise of SMC-2 saw a new military junta, the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC, on the Ghanaian political scene. Rawlings became the chairman, with Major Boachijan as the spokesman. Other members of the AFRC were Major Mensa Poku, Major Mensa Gwedema, Warrant Officer Class 2 Obin, Private Owusu Edu, and Corporal Owusu Boate. General Hamidu was named as the liaison officer between the AFRC and the government bureaucracy. The AFRC declared that the coup d'etat was not to stop the return to civilian rule, but to clear up the mess created by the previous regimes. The AFRC established the People's Revolutionary Court, also known as the Kangaroo Courts. These were special courts set up to trial various offenses against the state. Many people were tried, and those found guilty of charges preferred against them were punished. Among those jailed were J.W.K. Harley, a former IGP and a member of the National Liberation Council (NLC), was jailed 25 years. E.O. Boache alias Boache Mattress, a businessman, was jailed 25 years. Ernest Aku, a former IGP, was jailed 25 years. B.S.K. Kwache, also a former IGP, was jailed 25 years. And E.K. Owusu of Coups Motors was also jailed 25 years. Others were U.K. Yamwa, alias Kojo Sardine, a businessman, was jailed 20 years. Squadron leader George Tego, Squadron leader Abebrese, Colonel Alhaji, Group Captain Jackson, Colonel Amevo, 20 years each. On July 4, 1979, the Inspector General of Police, Colonel Lamte, announced that 36 senior police officers were to proceed on compulsory leave as part of the cleaning up exercise. They were accused of straightforward cases of stealing, hoarding, profiteering, amassing illegal wealth, and acting as frontmen for women and other businesses concerned in the procurement of essential commodities. As a first step in the house cleaning exercise, Colonel Ignatius Kutu Acheampong of the NRC and Major General E.K. Utuka were executed at the Teshi military range on June 16, 1979, after a hastily assembled revolutionary court. 10 days later, June 26, the death sentence on General F.W.K. Kufuor of the SMC-2, Lieutenant General A.A. Afrifa of the NLC, both were ex-head of state, Major General R.E. Kote, Air Vice Marshal George Yawache, Rear Admiral J.K. Amedome, and Colonel R.J.A. Feli was pronounced and implemented. They had apparently been found guilty of corrupt practices, while the Christian Council of Ghana pleaded with the AFRC to temper justice with mercy. Many ordinary people, workers, and especially students from the universities demanded let the blood flow in support of the executions. These officers were executed on the same day of 26 June 1979. as a way of purging off corruption. Women were arrested for selling commodities above the control prices. They were stripped naked and shipped in the open. Many Lebanese, Syrian, and Indian businessmen who had always been alleged to be part of these corrupt practices were rounded up at random and brutalized. Some had their houses looted. Dismissal of public servants, confiscation of assets and properties were applied as a means of stamping out corruption and also other malpractices which crippled the country's economy. Though Rawlings became an instant hero for his patriotism, courage, and dislike for injustice, Ghanaians were not enthused about the country experiencing another long period of military rule, and therefore the AFRC had to abide by its own promise of going back to the barracks on October 1st, 1979. For these reasons, the elections, which had been slated for June 18, 1979, were duly held. Some of the political parties that contested the 1979 elections were the People's National Party, PNP, headed by Dr. Hilla Liman, the Popular Front Party, PFP, led by Victor Owusu, the United National Convention, UNC, under the leadership of William Oforiatta, and the Action Congress Party, ACP, with Colonel retired Frank George Benasco as its head. Others were the Third Force Party, TFP, and the Social Democratic Front, SDF, led by John Bilson and Ibrahim Manama, respectively. After the election, the parliamentary votes showed a clear majority for the PNP, which secured 71 out of the 140 seats contested. Dr. Hilla Liman, the PNP presidential candidate, together with his running mate, J.W. de Graaf Johnson, pulled 35.51% of vote cast, as opposed to the Victor Owusu's 29.69% of vote cast. Though the PNP won the majority in the parliamentary election, its candidate failed to pull 50% plus 1 of votes cast as required by the law to have outright victory, and therefore another balloting had to be organized between the two leading contestants, namely Dr. Hilla Liman and Victor Owusu. In the second round of the presidential election held on 9th July 1979, Dr. Hilla Liman pulled 61.98% as against Victor Owusu's 39.2%. On September 24, 1979, the AFRC handed power to Dr. Hilla Liman. For the third time, Ghanaians had the chance to be governed under parliamentary democracy, and this ushered the country into the Third Republic.
Revolutionary Council, during our short stay in power, have demonstrated openly what many people had only suspected before, namely that the holding of office in government in this country had in almost all cases been used to plunder the wealth of the nation. Ghana is looking up to you. Thank you.
Now that the people of Ghana have democratically elected me to their president, I call on all, in the true spirit of patriotism, to come together as one united country, determined to solve the many and difficult problems facing us. Let us marshal the rich human resources available throughout the country and together march forward in unity and service to the nation. All of us
have a duty to work to salvage our shattered economy and regain the lost image and prestige of Mother Ghana. Each and every one of us has a role to play. To this end, no sacrifice can be too great. No offer can be too little. As emphasized during the election campaign, my administration shall be based on discipline, probity, and hard work. I assure you that I shall do my best to uphold these principles. I will set the appropriate examples myself. And of course, I expect and will insist on efficiency in the various sectors of the economy and in the public services.
On 31st December 1981, there was the return of Jerry John Rawlings in less than 3 years. The PNP government was overthrown in a bloodless coup led by Jerry John Rawlings on 31st December 1981. Rawlings declared that holy war was necessary due to the failure of the PNP government to provide effective leadership and the collapse of the national economy and state services. He went on to announce the suspension of the 1979 Third Republican Constitution, the dismissal of all members of government, the dissolution of parliament, and the banning of political parties. Rawlings proclaimed the establishment of the Provisional National Defense Council, PNDC. This military government ruled Ghana from December 1981 till 7 January 1993, when Rawlings was elected as the first president of the Fourth Republic under the government of the National Democratic Congress. In less than a year into the PNDC's regime, 30th June 1982, Ghana was again hit with another sad news. This time it was not a coup, but the country woke up to the news of the gruesome murder of 3 High Court judges and a retired army officer. These High Court judges were Cecilia Corantin, Frederick Opoku-Sarkodie, and Kwadwo Acheampong. The retired army officer was Sam Akwa, who was then the head of personnel at Ghana Industrial Holding Corporation, GIHOC. The reasons for their murder was unknown. Cecilia Corantin Addo was abducted and murdered in secret by some unknown men on 30th June 1982, along with the 2 other Supreme Court justices, Frederick Opoku-Sarkodie and Kwadwo Acheampong, and the retired army officer Sam Akwa. The murder took place at the Bundasi military shooting range in the Accra Plains during the hours of a nighttime curfew. The unknown men had taken their captives to the Bundasi military firing range and executed them. The murderers carried along a gallon of fuel, petrol, with which they set fire to the bodies to cover up their crime. But historical accounts have noted that it rained that day, so the bodies did not burn as the murderers had wanted. Their charred bodies were discovered in the same location the following day. Following intense pressure on Rawlings and the PNDC, a Special Investigation Board, SIB, was formed by the government to investigate the murderers. The SIB was headed by former Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Azu Krepi, to unravel the mystery. In their report, the SIB established that the abduction and murder were a plot hatched with the connivance of members of the PNDC. These were Captain Amedeka, Tony Tepo, Zandu, and Heckley, as well as ex-PNDC member Amatekwe. The SIB also found out that the entire plot was masterminded by Captain Kojo Chikata, a PNDC member in charge of national security. However, the PNDC rejected that particular aspect of the report and let Captain Chikata and 4 others off the hook for lack of evidence. In 1992, the Independent newspaper reported findings of the SIB's inquiry in Ghana, which it said had recommended the prosecution of 10 people for the murder, including Ghana's head of national security at that time, Kojo Chikata. Chikata, who was Rawlinson's right-hand man, filed a defamation lawsuit against the Independent on 26 March 1993, which he agreed to drop after the Independent published a correction statement in September 1998, in which they clarified that they had not intended to suggest that Chikata was guilty of the crime. 4 of the 9 suspects were jailed. When on 19 June 1983, there was a jailbreak at the Insawam medium prisons and the Acheampong prisons. Captain Amedeka escaped from captivity and has since not been seen. But his 3 accomplices, Tony Tepo, Asanzu, and Heckley, as well as ex-PNDC member Amatekwe, were executed by firing squad. Before his death in 2020, Mr. Rawlins always insisted that before Amatekwe was executed, he confessed at stake to forcefully accusing Mr. Chikata of involvement in the execution of the charges.
People still continue to level allegations against me as a conspirator in the crime to murder the judges and Major Alpo.
Was it possible for the 4 young soldiers, corporals, lance corporals, to undertake that major activity without authority from the superior authority, without orders or instructions from the superior authority? Would they have done that on their own initiative?
My dear General, one of them, without anybody's authority, killed my relative. Those young soldiers were not taking official orders to go and kill people. They were not taking official orders.
Wouldn't the circumstances have been different? Your uncle, wouldn't the circumstances have been different? I don't know the sort of reasons why they would have killed your uncle. I don't know. But whether they knew him or there was some sort of personal reason, I don't know. I don't know the circumstances. But here we have the judges and our own colleagues and whom they didn't know. They didn't know where they lived. They had no sort of relationship with them. They bore them no grudge. Could they have done that on their own initiative?
In the evidence of the ISIB, they all stated that they were doing what they did under the instructions of Amatekwe. That is what all of them said in the evidence before the ISIB and before the tribunal. Amatekwe was a member of the PNDC, yes. That is what they all said.
Did he hold any special position?
He was a member of the PNDC in charge of TUC affairs.
So does it mean any member of PNDC can get hold of any of the soldiers and give them orders to do anything?
That is what they did. I'm not saying that that is legal. That is what they said they did.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that they are gone. Amatekwe is gone, and it's difficult to. But it sounds a little bit difficult to understand the system whereby any member of government could just order soldiers to, undertake such.
My dear General, that is why Acheampong was prosecuted and executed. It was not right for him to have done what he did. It was not a matter of system. Acheampong was responsible for the crime he committed with America and the others.
Ghana, after independence, went through turbulent crises of military coups. The First Republic was overthrown by the National Liberation Council led by J.A. Nkrumah in 1966. The Second Republic was also overthrown by the National Redemption Council led by Ignatius Kutu Acheampong in 1972. Jerry John Rawlings grew discontent with Ignatius Kutu Acheampong's government. Acheampong was accused of not only corruption but also of maintaining Ghana's dependency on pre-colonial powers in a situation which led to economic decline and impoverishment. Rawlings was part of the Free African Movement, an underground movement of military officers who wanted to unify Africa through a series of coups. On Tuesday, 15th May 1979, 5 weeks prior to civilian elections in Ghana, Rawlings and 6 other soldiers staged a coup against the government of General Frederick Kufuor, but failed and were arrested by the military. Rawlings was publicly sentenced to death in a general court-martial and imprisoned, although his statement on the social injustices that motivated his actions won him civilian sympathy. While awaiting executions, Rawlings was sprung up from custody on Monday, 4th June 1979, by a group of soldiers, claiming that the government was corrupt beyond redemption and that new leadership was required for Ghana's development. He led the group in a coup to oust the Kufuor government and Supreme Military Council. Shortly afterwards, Rawlings established and became the chairman of a 15-member Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC, primarily composed of junior officers. He and the AFRC ruled for 112 days and arranged the execution by firing squad of 8 military officers, including General Kote, Joy Amedome, Roger Feli, and Utuka, as well as 3 former Ghanaian heads of state, Acheampong, Kufuor, and Akwesi Afrifa. On Monday, 24 September 1979, power was peacefully handed over by Rawlings to President Hila Liman, whose People's National Party, PNP, had the support of Nkrumah's followers. 2 years later, on 31 December 1981, Rawlings ousted President Hila Liman in a coup d'etat, claiming that civilian rule was weak and that the country's economy was deteriorating. In place of Liman's People's National Party, Rawlings established the Provisional National Defense Council, PNDC, a military junta, as the official government. Although the PNDC claimed to be the representative of the people, it lacked experience in the creation and implementation of clear economic policies. Rawlings's economic policies led to an economic crisis in 1983, forcing him to undertake structural adjustment and submit himself to election to retain power. Elections were held in January 1992, leading Ghana back to multi-party democracy which ushered in the Fourth Republic. Rawlings established the National Commission on Democracy (NCD) shortly after the 1982 coup, and it employed it to survey civilian opinion and make recommendations that would facilitate the process of democratic transition. In March 1991, the NCD released a report recommending the election of an executive president, the establishment of a National Assembly, and the creation of the post of Prime Minister. The PNDC used the NCD's recommendations to establish a committee for the drafting of a new constitution based on past Ghanaian constitutions that lifted the ban on political parties in May 1992 after it was approved by a referendum. On Friday, 3rd November 1992, election results compiled by the EC from 200 constituencies showed that Rawlings's NDC had won 60% of the votes and had obtained the majority needed to prevent a second round of voting. More specifically, the NDC won 62% in the Bron-Ahafo region, 93% in the Volta region, and majority votes in the Upper West, Upper East, Northern, Central, and Greater Accra regions. His opponent, Professor Edubuahi, won 31% of the vote. Former President Hila Liman of PNP won 6.8% of the vote. Voter turnout was 50%. The ability of opposition parties to compete was limited by the vast advantages Rawlings possessed. Rawlings's victory was aided by the various party structures that were integrated into society during his rule, called the organs of the revolution. Rawlings held a monopoly over the national media and was able to censor print and electronic media through a PNDC newspaper licensing decree, PNDC Law 221. Moreover, Rawlings imposed a 20,000 cedis, equivalent of $400 cap on campaign contributions, which made national publicity of opposition parties virtually impossible. Rawlings himself began campaigning before the official unbanning of political parties and had access to state resources, and also was able to effectively meet all monetary demands required of a successful campaign. Rawlings traveled across the country, initiating public works, projects, and giving public employees a 60% pay rise prior to the election day. Opposition parties rejected the election results, citing incidents of vote stuffing in various regions where Rawlings was likely to lose, and rural areas with scant population, as well as a bloated voters register and a partisan electoral commission. However, the Commonwealth Observer Group, led by Sir Elias Clark, approved of the election as free and fair, as there were few issues at polling stations and had no major incidents of voter coercion. Opposition parties boycotted subsequent Ghana parliamentary and presidential elections and the unicameral National Assembly, of which NDC officials won 189 of 200 seats, and essentially established a one-party parliament that lacked legitimacy and also had limited legislative powers. After the disputed election, the PNDC was transformed into the National Democratic Congress, NDC. Rawlings took office on Thursday, 7 January 1993, the same day that the new 1992 Constitution came into effect, and the government became known as the Fourth Republic of Ghana. Rawlings established the Economic Recovery Program, ERP, suggested by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in 1982 due to the poor state of the economy after 18 months of attempting to govern it through administrative controls and mass mobilization. The policies implemented caused a dramatic currency devaluation, the removal of price controls, and social service subsidies which favored farmers over urban workers, and privatization of some state-owned enterprises and restraints on government spending. Funding was provided by bilateral donors reaching $800 million in 1987 and 1988 and $900 million in 1989. Between 1992 and 1996, Rawlings eased control over the judiciary and civil society, allowing a more independent Supreme Court and the publication of independent newspapers. Opposition parties operated outside of Parliament and held rallies and press conferences. The biggest demonstration in Ghana, known as Kumipreko, which means "you may as well kill me" in the Akan language, took place in 1995. Those at the forefront of this protest were Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, Dr. Charles Rekubrobe, Kwesi Pratt Jr., Dr. Nyahu Tamaklo, Abdul Malik Kwekubaku, Akoto Ampao, Victor Newman, Kweku Opoku, Napoleon Abdullahi, and was also joined by some 100,000 people. What was termed as the high cost of living, and particularly the imposition of the value-added tax VAT on items, fueled the demonstration against the then Rawlings' administration.
The policies that the government has been implementing are policies that do not find favor with the general mass of our people, and that the mass of the people of this country have been systematically impoverished during the period of Rawlings' rule. It is not a point of view that has found very much favor in the parts of the world from where you come from, who have been pouring out an endless stream of how so many things wonderful were going on in Ghana.
According to reports, it was a period in which able-bodied and hard-working citizens could not afford one decent meal a day for a family.
If your child is sick, you can't take her to any clinic because of money.
In addition, the dropout rate in educational institutions was said to be rising at a very alarming rate. However, what started as a peaceful protest turned gory when some unidentified assailants opened fire on the demonstrators. Many sustained severe injuries and others died from the attacks. Given the various issues with the 1992 elections, the 1996 elections were a great improvement in terms of electoral oversight. Voter registration was recompiled, with close to 9.2 million voters registering at nearly 19,000 polling stations, which the opposition had largely approved after party agents had reviewed the list. The emphasis on transparency led Ghanaian non-governmental organizations to create the network of domestic election observers, which trained nearly 4,100 local poll watchers. This organization was popular across political parties and civic groups. On the day of the election, more than 60,000 candidate agents monitored close to all polling sites and were responsible for directly reporting results to their respective party leaders. The parallel vote tabulation system allowed polling sites to compare their results to the official ones released by the Electoral Commission. The Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, was established to discuss election preparations with all parties and the Electoral Commission, as well as establish procedures to investigate and resolve complaints. Presidential and parliamentary elections were held on the same day, and see-through boxes were used in order to further ensure the legitimacy of the elections. Despite some fears of electoral violence, the election was peaceful and had a 78% turnout rate and was successful with only minor problems such as inadequate supply of ink and parliamentary ballots. The two major contenders of the 1996 election were Rawlings's NDC and J.A. Kufuor's Great Alliance, an amalgamation of the New Patriotic Party (NPP) and the People's Conventions Party (PCP). The Great Alliance based their platform on ousting Rawlings and attacked the incumbent government for its poor fiscal policies. However, they were unable to articulate a clear positive message of their own or plans to change the current economic policy. As Ghana was heavily dependent on international aid, local leaders had minimal impact on the economy.
Space of about 3 months and proving that there's something like professionalism in politics. This is why the tide has swung to my side. Because I believe I know what is at stake and I'm conveying the right message.
The Electoral Commission reported that Rawlings had won by 57%, with Kufuor obtaining 40% of the vote. Results by district were similar to those in the 1992, with the opposition winning the Ashanti region and some constituencies in Eastern and Greater Accra, and Rawlings winning in his ethnic hometown, the Volta region, and faring well in every other region. The NDC took 134 seats in the assembly compared to the opposition's 66, and the NPP took 60 seats in the parliamentary. The 1992 constitution limits a president to 2 terms, even if they are non-consecutive. Rawlings did not attempt to amend the document to allow him to run for a 3rd term in 2000. He retired in 2001 and was succeeded by J.A. Kufuor, his main rival and opponent, in 1996. Going into the 2000 elections, the NDC was represented by Prof. Evans Fifi Atta-Mills, while the NPP was represented by John Ejekum Kufuor. At the end of the elections, Kufuor won the presidential election of December 2000 in the first round, held on December 7th. Kufuor came in first place with 48.4%, whilst John Atta-Mills came in second with 44.8%, forcing the two into a runoff vote. In the second round, held on 28 December, Kufuor was victorious, taking 56.9% of the vote. When Kufuor was sworn in on 7 January 2001, it marked the first time in Ghana's history that an incumbent government had peacefully transitioned of power to the opposition. Kufuor became the second president of the Fourth Republic of Ghana.
That I will at all times
preserve,
protect,
and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana,
and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana,
and that I dedicate myself
to
the service and well-being of the people of the Republic of Ghana,
to the service and well-being of the people of the Republic of Ghana,
and to do right to all manner of persons.
Kufuor was re-elected in presidential and parliamentary elections held on 7 December 2004, earning 52.45% of the popular vote in the first round and thus avoiding a runoff, while at the same time, Kufuor's party, the New Patriotic Party, was able to secure more seats in the Parliament of Ghana. Kufuor's administration's domestic policy in the first term was marked by fiscal and monetary stringency on the economic front, aimed at stabilizing the national economy that stagnated and was in decline. His social vision was focused on unleashing the entrepreneurial, creative, and innovative potential of Ghanaians as a means of creating wealth and hence dealing with the social challenges facing them. His administration is said to have received the most financial assistance in the history of Ghana, due essentially to donors' distrust for the military government before it, as well as those with some military connections. Kufuor's foreign policy was underpinned by what he termed economic diplomacy. It is within this context that in Africa in general and in West Africa in particular, a good neighborless policy had been pursued, which saw Ghana under Kufuor brokering peace in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and Guinea-Bissau, among other African states.
That there should be an end to violence. They both condemn violence. And they also agree that there should be dialogue. And this dialogue should be under the auspices of a panel of eminent Africans.
On the global stage, Kufuor actively sought the establishment of a just and equitable international social and economic order, while promoting and safeguarding the interests of Ghana through bilateral and multilateral agreements. Due to the policy successes his administration accumulated, Kufuor had his mandate renewed in 2004 and was sworn into office on 7 January 2005. Policy direction in Kufuor's second term built on the foundations laid in the first 4 years. The administration pursued Ghana's socio-economic transformation in the second term using the three-pronged approach of private sector development, human resource development, and good governance. At the international level, Kufuor consolidated Ghana's position as the voice of Africa, credible peace broker, beacon of democracy, and responsible member of the Committee of Nations. On 29 January 2007, Kufuor was elected as chairperson of the African Union for the 2007-2008 AU session. Kufuor was involved in a car accident during his presidency on 14 November 2007, in which car collided with his, causing it to roll over several times. Kufuor was reported to be uninjured. Kufuor started the National Health Insurance Scheme to replace the existent cash and carry system. 11 million Ghanaians were registered under this scheme. He set up the National Ambulance Service and built more than 205 hospitals and clinics. He also built a state-of-the-art emergency center at the Okonfo-Anokye Teaching Hospital. Kufuor also introduced free maternal health care in public hospitals for all expectant mothers. Kufuor institutionalized the capitation grant for school children at the basic level, whereby each student was entitled to $2 for culture, sports, and development. He also started the National School Feeding Program. He changed the senior secondary school curriculum from 3 years to 4 years and renamed it Senior High School. Kufuor launched the Microfinance and Small Loans Program, MASLOC, a US $50 million fund that makes microloans available to the productive population. For the first time in Ghana's history, borrowing became so cheap and available that microfinance companies and major banks actually went on the streets to encourage small-scale businessmen and women to apply for loans.
Adichia, medemase. Nyenyi wala don. Akwe, Nagode, and may God bless us all. Thank you.
In the 2008 elections, John Agyekum Kufuor was no longer eligible to run as president, having served 2 terms. It was during this term that the term Better Ghana Agenda was coined. Atta Mills's main opponent from the New Patriotic Party was now Nana Akufo-Addo.
And one thing I want to leave with you, if by the grace of God, we win in December, the one district, one factory policy is a
Mills ran under the campaign slogan of A Better Man for a Better Ghana on a platform of change. The results of the first ballot had Kufuor in front with 49.13% to Mills's 47.92%. However, a second round of voting was needed. The second round of voting took place on 28 December 2008. The results was a slim lead held by Mills, but due to problems with the distribution of ballots, the 10th constituency, located in the Bron Ahafo region, was forced to vote again on 2nd January 2009. The final results was a victory by Mills with 50.23% of the vote to Kufuor's 49.77%. Mills became the third president of the Fourth Republic of Ghana, self-described as a social democrat who believed in the concept of social welfare espoused by Kwame Nkrumah. Mills embraced a political platform that was more comprehensive and less divisive than that of either Nkrumah or Rawlings. John Atta Mills was sworn in as president on 7th January 2009 in a peaceful transition after Kufuor was narrowly defeated.
I shall submit myself to the laws of the Republic of Ghana and suffer the penalty for it. So help me God.
I'm prepared, Madam Speaker, to pay royalties to the MPP for using moving forward. In other words, yes, it's still name.
Under Mills, Ghana's stable economy experienced sustained reduced inflation, leading to the attainment of a single-digit inflation of about 8.4%, one of the lowest inflation rates Ghana had attained in 42 years, that is, the period between 1970 and 2012, as well as the lowest since June 1992, just before the start of the Fourth Republic, from a high of 18.1% in December 2008. This is indicative of prudent fiscal, monetary, and other austerity policy measures that characterized his presidency to put the economy on a healthy shape. The Ghanaian currency, the cedi, also stabilized as a result of these policies. In 2011, Ghana was the fastest growing economy in the world at 20.15% for the first half of the year and 14.4% at the end of the financial year, according to the IMF and economicwatch.com. Moreover, Ghana's budget deficit was reduced to 2% of the gross domestic product during his tenure, compared to 14.5% of GDP in 2008, just before he was elected as the president of Ghana.
Our economy is resilient. Well, Madam Speaker, when you are pronouncing, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, when you are pronouncing such figures in billions, and I want to remind you that I didn't even know how to translate them into OPPPP.
There was also a huge improvement in Ghana's gross international reserves and foreign direct investment, highlighting exceptional microeconomic performance. The Mills government also implemented the single-spine salary structure, which increased compensation levels of all public sector workers. In a bid to improve the efficiency in revenue collection, Mills established the Ghana Revenue Authority, which integrated the value-added tax, customs and preventive service (SEPS) and the Internal Revenue Services. Under his governance, Ghana met 3 out of the 4 primary convergence criteria for the proposed common currency, ECO, of the West African Monetary Zone. These accomplishments led to the renewed domestic and foreign investor confidence in Ghana's economy. During Mills' time in office, Ghana was adjudged the best place for doing business in West Africa and best West African performer in access to credit, according to the 2011 World Bank Doing Business Global Rankings. There was also an increase in the capitation grants. The government also introduced a program to provide free school uniforms to deprived communities while providing over 100,000 laptops or notebooks to school children to facilitate the learning process in a highly technological world. An initiative to provide free exercise books started under Mills. More than 23 million books were distributed. His government also expanded the school feeding program to include 230 more schools. Government paid the full tuition for all teachers pursuing further studies through distance learning. 2 specialized public universities were established during his tenure, the University of Health and Allied Sciences in the Volta region and the University of Energy and Natural Resources in the Bron-Ahafo region. His government also built several polyclinics to increase access to healthcare. The government also scaled up the National Ambulance Service to cover all districts in the nation. Increased collaboration between stakeholders led higher patronage of the National Health Insurance Scheme. Utilization of the scheme rose by 75%. True to his promise to reduce the number of ministerial appointees and run a lean government, the number of ministers was significantly reduced from 87 of the previous Kufuor's NPP government to 73, a reduction of 16% in the Mills-led government. It was projected that approximately $4 million was saved annually by this bold decision to run a small government. The hundreds of special assistants, presidential staffers, and spokespersons were also eliminated to improve fiscal efficiency. He commissioned a review of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana in a bid to improve upon the country's governance architecture. He held an annual media forum every year at the presidency to interact with journalists about social political issues.
For you, sir, would you say that indeed it was an action year? What for you were the major achievements for the year 2011?
Clearly, the year 2011 was an action year. If you go around, as I did, to the various regions, to the various districts, to see what successes we have been able to show. We turned so many schools and the streets, brick and mortar structures. We provided water to areas which are not seeing potable water.
In order to ensure intergenerational equity because of the finite nature of resource revenue, as well as financial security for future Ghanaian generations, the Mills government established in 2011 the Ghana Heritage Fund, a sovereign wealth fund generated from petroleum revenue accumulated from the country's oil and gas industry. Under Mills, the producer price of cocoa increased appreciably to $1,600 per ton of 16 bags, which was the highest in the sub-region and the highest that had ever been paid to cocoa farmers in Ghana's entire history. Cocoa production also hit a record-breaking of 1 million metric tons.
The country has been thrown into a state of shock following reports that the President of the Republic of Ghana, Professor John Evans Atta Mills, is dead. According to a press statement from the presidency signed by the Chief of Staff, Mr. John Henry Mate Newman, he died at the 37 Military Hospital in Accra, where he had gone for medical treatment.
Prof. Mills died on 24 July 2012, 3 days after his 68th birthday. Though the cause of his death was not immediately released, he had been suffering from throat cancer and had recently been to the US for medical reasons. According to the BBC, his voice had degenerated in the previous few months.
I have just arrived from the US, where I undertook a regular medical checkup. Thank God, everything is okay. But let me explain something. It is my tradition to have regular medical checkup in Ghana. However, my doctors felt that for one or two reasons, which required more comprehension, we will go outside the country. Now, according to the Constitution, whenever I leave the country, I have to indicate. But thanks to each and every one of you, I would urge that we continue to pray for all those who decide to go for medical checkup or to go for review. I have a message. The report of the review tell me one thing, that past, the present, and the future. And therefore, I should drive from here to the castle to continue my work. Now, let me tell you this thing. We should all work together. We in NDC, we have a job to do. Let us make use of the facilities which have been given to us. Anyone, when they want you ask, you want to one more pay. You want to one more pay this way or that way. But this has shown one thing. God is in control. May God be praised. Thank you.
His Vice President, John Dramani Mahama, was sworn in about 20 o'clock GMT on the same day. In accordance with Ghana's constitution, Mahama's tenure expired at the same time Mills's was due to end by the end of the year, just prior to an election. From 8th to 10th August, his body laid in state, and Ghanaian government officials, civil society, traditional leaders, the clergy, the general public, and dignitaries. After the funeral service, the president's body was taken on a military procession through some principal streets of the Ghanaian capital, Accra, and then for a burial in a newly created presidential mausoleum.